Hello, hello. Good to see everybody. Happy, what day is it today? Tuesday. We were just saying that it kind of feels like Monday. Hopefully, everyone had some wonderful Mother's Day plans. Happy Mother's Day to everybody who celebrated on Sunday. I am your host, Stephanie McPhail. I am the co-host of the weekly show, Kicking Healthy Relationships to the Curb, with Steve, who I think will be coming on in a minute. We are going to have a guest today who's actually been on the show before. And we had a really great conversation last time. And so we figured that we would bring her back on. So I just got a message that Steve was actually in transit. So it looks like he's going to have to find another place where there's some better internet connection. So why don't we just bring on Diane and introduce her to get everything started? So if you can roll on her description so we can welcome her to the show, that would be awesome. All right, Diane. Healing is the common theme in Diane's entire body of work. She initially learned to heal companies in crisis as a consultant with expertise in women-owned businesses. She created a professional touring songwriter show with a focus on songs that heal, which was picked up by television and syndicated in 100 million U.S. households and 3 countries. She was called to run for State House of Representatives to help heal a broken system for our veterans after the loss of her brother to PTSD in 2016, a Special Ops Marine who served in Afghanistan. After painfully being canceled by her liberal adult son during her political campaign, she was called to start the Lady Up movement, which is empowering Christian conservative moms to best influence the toughest political conversations of a lifetime. Her winding path to healing after significant losses, which she openly shares in her book, Lady Up and Don't Quit, has developed a fierce faith in Jesus, that unshakable and unapologetic helping profession. Welcome to the show, Diane. Oh, there's more. Sorry. There wasn't a single decision that led her to seek out a coaching certification and start working with couples. It was an innate curiosity about the world and a desire to change her own internal state that eventually led her to start a podcast, become a coach, and open her own business. All right. Welcome, Diane. Thank you so much. That's so much great information there. It kept going. Like,
That's a lot. That's a lot. Hey, Stephanie, thanks for having me back.
Good to see you again. So
I'm tired.
For those of you who don't know you, like tell everybody about your background. What is the reason for you to do all these wonderful things that you do?
I think everything in our life it's like breadcrumbs. I think God drops breadcrumbs, and every time you pick one up and you continue to trust him and continue following him, he kind of strings our lives and all of our experiences together. I don't think anything's wasted. So it's been like from the outside looking in, a lot of my friends are like, how did you get here from there? But to me, it was a very natural transition. Started out in management consulting, early part of my career. I had a consultant who took me under wing, and she taught me the ropes on how to heal businesses that were in crisis. They were kind of going down like the Titanic, and we would go in and right that ship and try to keep everybody from quitting and try and nurture the company back to health. And so a lot of it was the internal feelings, dynamics, all of that we really had to get to the root of and bring peace to that situation and put it back in harmony, So I think I've been training for this even from back then. Then I moved into a professional songwriting career. And of course, that's all about, the human condition. What makes our hearts, how do we heal after traumas? How do we heal after broken relationships and, heartbreaks, things like that. So spent a lot of my time here in Nashville early on learning the songwriting ropes. And then now in political office, I always say that I'm so glad I had the music background before politics, because it was a great training ground for this work. I'll tell you, so many similarities in that. But now the way that our country is so fractured, I feel like I'm kind of doing the consulting job of my life right now, trying to work with people and who are smart people like you and Steve, who are on that same path of trying to bring healing to broken relationships. It's just now in the political realm. So how do we heal? How do we begin to have civil conversation again? What does that look like at the practical level? Because these big lofty ideas, people say, oh, we need to take a stand, or, oh, we need to heal, but that's so abstract. I love to break things down to the practical and say, what does that look like at the everyday level? So that's the work I'm doing now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Steve, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, ladies. First of all, happy Mother's Day. I don't know if Diane, you're a mom, but
Thank you. Yeah.
Stephanie is. So happy Mom's Day. And sorry to join late. But you just mentioned something. You're from Nashville, and you said music is a great training ground into what you're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that a little bit. Why is that such a great training ground?
Oh my gosh, there's so many parallels in that. When we look at the human heart, right? There are things that we go through in life, like our personal experiences, like I said, heartbreaks, relationships, all the things that you write songs about. It's so emotionally triggering, right? And now in the political world, we are so emotionally triggered as a society right now. And so bringing healing in both of those realms, it was just wonderful preparation for this work. But then you look at maybe the more not so pretty side of it, the dynamics that go on, people posturing, people vying for position, people twisting and turning, things to try to get ahead. So much of the ugly underbelly, of the music industry is very similar to what goes on politically too. So, I think God prepared me in both ways, on the positive and on the negative.
So what would you think? I mean, as someone who's helped companies come together, and now from your political aspect now, what would you suggest? How can we, because I think about this all the time, how is it possible? And if so, how can we start bridging that divide and start reconnecting? Because I feel like as time is going on, it's just getting further and further apart, the way things are going with the internet, with social media. People, like you said, people are making up things about either side and pointing fingers, and frustration and all these things are coming up. How can we actually come back together and start listening to each other instead of being defensive or pointing fingers or trying to make somebody look like the bad guy?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've done a lot of work in this area. I've been in a tunnel for the last 2 years, just deep diving for these answers. And I know this might sound a little trite, but it's just the truth. I've broken this down literally into 3 steps. And they're simple, and they're not, rocket science. I mean, Jesus laid out the path for us on this, but they're not easy. So they're simple, but they're not easy. The first step that I like to point people toward is what I call housekeeping. And that's where we have to take a really good hard look in the mirror and really get into some prayer and get honest with ourselves and say, what am I doing that could possibly be contributing to this outcome that I don't want? I think on both sides, there's a lot of profit in rivalry. And what I've learned from being very up close and personal to the political world is that this is a 2-headed dragon. Like we have corruption on both sides. And when we've got news organizations and social media and all these things kind of stoking those fires, it's kind of like 2 rival football teams or something, right? You buy all the merch, you are on that team, by God. There's a lot of money to be made in that. And so both sides are really stoking that fire in us as Americans. So we're kind of being played a little bit by both sides. Mm-hmm. And what I want to do is just bring people back to center and say, okay, let's look in the mirror. Let's get into this housekeeping piece and let's see, what are we doing? So we've got to go back to the truth. People say, oh, you live your truth, but there's one truth. And God laid that out for us biblically. And he is the gauge between right and wrong. So when we can come back to that and say, what does God say about this situation? We look at the fruit of the Spirit, like our behavior. We have to be walking out that fruit of the Spirit, the patience, the kindness, the goodness, all of those things that God lays out for us so beautifully. Self-control, peace, these things, not just trying to get some peace, but concentrating on bringing peace into every room that we walk into or every conversation that we enter. Like, we have a responsibility for our own behavior, and it has to be genuine. Like, we can't just put on a mask and act like, we're peaceful, kind, whatever. It's got to be genuine. So that starts with the housekeeping piece. Like, we don't have any problem in America except a heart problem. I say we don't, we don't have an abortion problem. We don't have a gun problem. We don't have, I mean, all these, we have a heart problem in America. And that's what we have to get right first. So we start with the housekeeping piece. Then once we get our own house cleaned up, then we can move into my second step, which I call entertaining. And it's just like when you have people over to your house and you want to entertain, like have a dinner party, you're not grilling them about what they believe. You're just leaning in. You're wanting to spend time with them. You want to be in their company. You want to understand their view of the world. You're kind of giving them the stage, so to speak. So you're leaning in and really wanting to get to know them as a person. So that's the entertaining part. When somebody says something that we don't agree with or something that just boils our blood, rather than coming back with our opinion about it, this is the place where we rest and we lean in and we say, tell me more about that. Help me understand. I really want to see this through your eyes. So it's that, and we go into this in great detail in my app, but that's kind of just the surface of it. So we've got the housekeeping, we've got the entertaining, where we're leaning in and just only listening for the sake of learning, not for responding. Then we move into what I call kind of the golden goose, which is the gardening piece. And this is where we're planting seeds. We're not trying to convert somebody. We're not trying to convince somebody to believe the way we do. We're only interested in sowing seeds. The harvest is up to God. And we are not, I always say, we're not Jesus Jr. We're not responsible for the outcome. So we can then release it and not be so attached to the outcome. We can release it, then we can genuinely show up in these conversations and just concentrate on sowing seeds. And these seeds for me in my work come in the form of what I call lingering questions. So they're just kind of these mic drop questions that are very, very well crafted. That's where a lot of that songwriting experience has come into play. But you're very masterfully crafting these questions that you drop in the conversation, and then you leave the conversation. Like you're not there to debate it. You're not there to convince them. You're just dropping it. You're just planting the seed. And then Elvis has left the building. Like you make an excuse to go. So you're like, I'm just going to leave you with this food for thought. And maybe when I see you next time, we can pick up where we left off. And I got to run. It's great to see you, but you get out of there. Mm-hmm. And then that question lingers in their mind and in their heart. You haven't done anything to repel them. You've just given them something to think about. And then the next time they see you, they actually want to talk to you, or they might re-engage because you've invited them to the discussion rather than putting them off with your opinion or your view of the world. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
This is Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. That's Stephanie McPhail. I'm Steve Vaccaro, and our special guest here, Diane Canada, Lady Up America. And Diane, I have to ask you a question. I want to go to the housekeeping part, and there's a book cover. But you mentioned that we don't have an abortion problem. We don't have a gun control problem. We don't have this kind of a problem. But politically, we can't get to the heart of the matter because what's going on, and we have a heart problem. So what would you say? Because Stephanie brought it up too. This country is so polarized, and it's hard to get to the heart of the matter. And that's what you're trying to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in that housekeeping piece, we're not trying to engage with anyone there except ourselves. So we're just coming back and trying to make sure our own heart is right. And when we come back to God and we're coming back to his leading and his prompting, that prompting from the Holy Spirit that kind of guides us toward that truth, that's what I'm talking about there. When our heart is right, then we can show up in these conversations and actually, move the needle maybe, or just at least engage in healthy discussions. But if we're coming at it from this place of aggression or this place of insistence that we're right, or all these, all of this negative energy that we're bringing into these conversations, then we never have hope to be able to influence anyone, because people are just so put off by us and they see us as just hypocrites, because that's not the way that leaders lead. They don't lead with throwing their weight around. They lead with attracting people to want to follow. And so that's just a very key difference. And we're never going to get there. We're never going to have the opportunity to influence anybody if we're not coming at this from a place of calm and peace. And like I said, we've done our own housekeeping to walk out that fruit of the Spirit.
And some of your clients, I would imagine, the work that you do, they have to have or establish a relationship with God, correct? That foundation has to be in place, or can you work with somebody developing their relationship with God because of the faith-based work that you're doing?
Yeah, so my client base, like the people who follow me, are Christian women typically. And so what I'm trying to do is maybe help them go deeper in their faith, or maybe at least put some things in context. So then as they go out and engage with people who maybe are non-believers, they have tools on how to do that. And again, not trying to convert people to Christianity, not trying to, convert people even to their political leaning. It's just going out into the world and trying to be that walking billboard of faith, that walking billboard for Christ, and representing him well in the marketplace. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to train up the women who will then go out and influence in the world. Does that make sense?
I love it. No, that's we have to get back to that, because I think during the pandemic we've all been challenged in different ways, and
Mm-hmm.
and some of those challenges, we couldn't go to our doctor's appointments, we couldn't do this, we couldn't go to our churches or synagogues. If you're Jewish, we couldn't
Mm-hmm.
go there, so there was isolation,
Yeah.
anxiety, and detachment. So coming from the pandemic, do you see that you're working with clients and women in that way as well?
There's definitely been a lot of, it's almost been like an emotional reset, I think, for a lot of people since the pandemic. That definitely had a tremendous impact on people on all sides of faith, or all sides of the aisle. I think that people are coming out of that now, and they're really, especially the women who follow me, they're really craving that community again. They don't want to be divided from people that they love and care about, especially their children. Like they don't want these divisions. They just don't know what to do about it. So with everything being so heightened over the last 2 years, what I see is that a lot of women especially are doing one of two things. They're either opting out of these tough conversations completely because they just don't want to risk hurting the relationship or being canceled or whatever it is. So they just don't say anything, or they attempt these conversations and they end up blowing up in their face. They end up just going south in a New York minute, and those relationships get destroyed. And that's what was happening to me. That's what happened to me with my son. My son's 33, and my political campaign exposed that we were so far apart politically, and I had no idea. And this is what's happening with a lot of women. Like the last 2 years, with all the heightened political rhetoric that's going on, it's just bubbled all of these differences up to the surface, and now they're in these impossibly tough conversations and they don't know how to approach them. And like I said, that's where I approached it terribly initially. I did it all wrong. I reprimanded my son for publicly calling me out. And I mean, and I'm not saying that that was necessarily what a lot of moms wouldn't have done. Like, my son was going on social media during my campaign and he was, insulting me. And my attitude was, I'm your mom. Like, pick up the phone and call me. You can disagree with me privately, but you don't get to weigh in like, like a stranger would. Like, there should be a respect there. And even though I felt like the sentiment of that was correct, I handled it all wrong, because all I did was, I ended up canceled. Like, my punishment for reprimanding him was he cut me out of his life. And so that's what's happening with so many moms. So many of my friends, I'm in my early 50s, and so many of my girlfriends who have adult children are going through the exact thing. So that's why I went on the deep dive to say there's got to be a better way. And had I known then what I know now, had it clicked with me sooner that a lot of the techniques I used to use in consulting and a lot of these leadership things that I'd learned, had I realized that some of those would apply in these tough political conversations, I would have never lost my son. It's been extremely painful, extremely painful. He's been married and had a baby since then, and I've not been invited to either one of those, groundbreaking moments in his life, and it's been incredibly painful. So God uses that pain and he repurposes it for me. It has driven me to come up with these solutions. So I hope to help other moms, help them prevent what I've been through with my son. But moms are struggling out there. And yes, the last 2 years and the pandemic and all that certainly played a huge role in these divisions in these families.
Do you feel like, do you feel like there is, because it still sounds like it's trying to get people to believe what you believe, and instead of trying to come together. I mean, it really is interesting to see the divide between one generation versus another one when it comes to religion and politics and all that kind of stuff. And so, I think as soon as we make it like, us versus them,
Right.
then we're automatically dividing. Like if they don't believe what I believe, then they're wrong. And either side, we see it on both sides. How do you think we can bridge that better? Because it can't be like, well, Christian and, conservative and this versus the liberal, whatever, like people that don't believe in Christianity. I mean, the country is mostly not Christian anymore. So how do we really come to that? How do we're not going to get everyone to be Christian. We're not going to, get everyone to be atheists. Like, how are we going to make that so that we're all different and we're going to be accepting of each other's differences and not impose our beliefs and wants on somebody else?
Yeah, it's a really tricky, this is a really tricky time for our country, because as a society, when we were initially founded on what I call it one moral compass, like we had one set of, values that we all, or at least most of America, agreed on. We weren't saying that you had to be Christian to live in America, but we were just saying the Bible is kind of the gauge between right and wrong. And so when we had that as a common moral compass, then we expected people to kind of self-govern their lives and for them to be responsible for their own lives. But we felt comfortable in that because we felt like everybody was kind of coming from at least the same place. Now, when we've got a society where, like you say, people believe, hundreds of different things, I don't know how. I wish I had that answer, Stephanie. I don't know how we're going to be sustainable as a society when we can't agree on what's right and what's wrong. And so that's the tricky part. But I think the first step is what I'm talking about, is at least showing up in these conversations, making attempts to understand each other's point of view, hoping that truth will find its way to the middle, and releasing the outcome. Like I was saying earlier, like we can't be so attached to the outcome that we insist that somebody believe the way we do, whatever side we believe. There's got to be freedom for people to choose how they are going to believe and how they're going to live. But I don't know how sustainable our society can be when we can't agree on what's right and what's wrong.
And I guess that's the root, right? Is if there's a base of love and empathy and understanding, and that actually is the base, you'd think that we could come together. But if it's not really love and empathy and, all of that, then I think you're right. I think it's really hard, to be understanding of other people and allow them to live their lives without trying to impose our beliefs on them. If we believe what we're doing is right, but the other person also believes that what they're doing is right also.
Yeah. And I think everybody does. Like everybody's trying. I mean, I think the majority of America, they're trying to do the right thing by what they believe, the way they were raised, their filters of the world, their experiences, we all come. And that was the beauty of America in so many ways. Like that's what bubbles up great ideas, is when our ideas can be challenged and our ideas can be vetted and our ideas can really be explored. That's the basis that I believe our founding fathers had for our country. That was the hope for America. But it's just become such a battleground now. Like you were saying earlier, it's an us against them. And I think if we hope to change that, then we personally, I think it's going to change one conversation at a time. I don't think there's any big cavalry coming out of Washington that's on either side that's going to fix it. I think it's going to come down to our culture, individual conversations. We know that politics is downstream of culture. That's just a result of where our culture is. So we've got to start finding the common ground and where we do agree. But it's got to start with us. It's got to start in the mirror. Neither one of us can come at these conversations like, combatant warriors. We have got to start taking personal responsibility. And I understand that people are mad and angry. I get that. But God teaches us that's not an excuse for bad behavior. Like we
So
still have a personal responsibility.
Diane, first of all, I admire you for the work that you do, because your adversity runs very, very, very deep. As far as the rejection of your son, you had a loss of a brother. How do you pivot to go day to day, but also turn around and empower and inspire others the way you do it? I find it remarkable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've done a lot of housekeeping of my own, a lot of healing, a lot of forgiveness work, and especially even just forgiving myself. I think sometimes we have to not forget that in our work that we're doing to heal, that sometimes we have to direct that on ourselves as well, because we're all a work in progress. We're all doing the best we can with what we know at the time. And yeah, these deep hurts and wounds and traumas, they're part of life. But the only explanation I can give you for my ability to get up and keep going, and my joy and my hope that I still have for America is in Jesus. I mean, that's the only explanation. I talked with one of my girlfriends the other day who, like I was saying, she has the same problem. Her adult daughter canceled her, has children now that she's never met, same thing. And she said, Diane, I was in bed for a year. It hurt so bad. I couldn't get out of bed for a year. She goes, this is still fresh for you, and you're up and you're moving. And she said, that's a testament to God. And it is. Like, I cling to God. I cling to my faith. So, I mean, every day I am in my Bible, because if I'm not, I would not have the ability to get up and keep going. I'm going to tell you, in the natural, like just me by myself without his help, I wouldn't do it. There's no way. It would hurt too bad. It would be too hard. I'd have a million excuses. But I think the best way to heal is to go serve others. Right. And again, that's Jesus's teaching.
No doubt. And we're just about out of time. I mean, we need another show with you again, because this is the work that you're doing is fascinating. But what is your goal for the remainder of 2023, and how can we support Lady Up America?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. My goal is just to get the app in as many hands as possible. I'd love for women to go into their app store at Google or Apple and download it. It's free. The app is free. We've got a 6-week challenge in there that's free. And there's a community in there that people can be a part of. I just would love to get this message to as many women as possible. That's my big goal.
Wow. Well, Diane, you're a remarkable person that's empowering others, and I'm so thankful that Stephanie and I were able to chat with you again. And we really want to support your efforts, and collaboratively, I'm wondering what we can do together, the three of us, and the work that we do to support your efforts moving forward.
Thank you, Steve. I really do appreciate that. And Stephanie, thank you both for having me, being so generous with your time, and giving Lady Up America a chance to be heard by your audience. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. You have a great night. God bless.
You too. Bye-bye, guys.
God bless.
Bye.
Well,